It was a warm evening in the city when Jamal stepped off the bus. The air smelled of concrete and summer sweat. People passed by, heads low, tired from their day. Jamal, 17, wore the same sneakers he had for 3 years. Soles worn, but still holding. He kept his head up. He always kept his head up. On the corner of 5th and Beasley, the shadows of the past still whispered. That's where his brother, Malik, had been stopped by the police 2 years ago for walking while black. They'd said he fit the description. They'd pushed him to the ground. They'd put a knee on his back. He'd lived, but a part of him never got back up. Jamal remembered. He remembered every scream, every siren, every silence that followed. His mother had stopped talking for a week after that day, not because she couldn't speak, but because no words would come. He walked past the same corner now, eyes scanning the sidewalk like it still held pieces of truth. The city had changed, but not enough. Jamal reached the steps of Lincoln High, the same school his mother had graduated from, the same place his grandfather wasn't allowed to enter in 1962. He touched the rusted railing and remembered the story. How his grandfather had stood outside in his best shirt, refused entrance because we don't enroll your kind here. It wasn't ancient history, it was his family, his skin. Inside the school, the hallways buzzed with movement and tension. A poster read, "Diversity Week." Jamal almost laughed. Last month, his best friend, Tariq, had been suspended for disrespecting a teacher by asking why there were no black authors in their English curriculum. They say the system isn't broken, but it was never built for them. As Jamal entered his classroom, he saw eyes glance up, then down. Some smiled, some didn't. His teacher, Mr. Daly, white, mid-30s, always trying, nodded and said, "Glad to see you, Jamal." But his tone was cautious, as if Jamal's presence required balance, like a fragile glass on a shaking table. Jamal sat near the window. Outside, the sky was iron gray. Rain was coming. He opened his notebook and wrote, "They took my brother's breath and left behind the echo. They took our books and replaced them with silence. But we are still here, still standing." The rain came down in cold sheets by lunchtime. Jamal sat alone under the awning by the old gym, watching the water cascade off the edge like a curtain. He liked the quiet. It helped him think. Earlier that day, Mr. Daly had asked the class to write an essay about freedom. Jamal had stared at the page for 10 minutes before finally writing one line. Freedom looks different when you're not free. He hadn't turned it in. Now he opened his phone and read the last message from his cousin, Devin, sent 6 weeks ago, the night before police found him lying face down in the alley behind Metro Mart. "Don't trust that cop. He keeps circling." Nobody had been charged. They said there wasn't enough body cam footage. They always said something. The rain made everything heavy, even memory. Across the yard, Jamal saw Mrs. Nwosu, the Nigerian-American counselor who always wore bright prints and spoke with a voice full of power. She saw him and waved him over. He hesitated, then stood and walked toward her. "Jamal," she said gently, "I read your poem on the school blog. The one about your brother." He nodded. She looked into his eyes, like she was trying to carry part of the weight. "Would you read it aloud at the assembly next week?" she asked. Jamal looked away. "I don't think they want to hear it." "Then that means they need to." The week moved slowly, heavy with anticipation. On the day of the assembly, Jamal sat backstage, heart pounding louder than the crowd's murmurs beyond the curtains. When his turn came, he stepped onto the stage under the harsh lights. The auditorium was packed. Students, teachers, even some parents. Silence fell. He cleared his throat and began, "They say the streets are safe. They say the law protects us all. But I walk with shadows that don't leave, and whispers that follow me home." His voice trembled but grew stronger with each line. My brother's name was more than a headline. He was laughter, dreams, and sunlight. Yet he became just a number, a story they tried to forget. Tears welled in his eyes as he looked out at the faces, some shocked, some ashamed, some moved. When he finished, the room stayed silent a moment longer, then a single clap, then another, until the whole auditorium was filled with applause, not just for the poem, but for the courage it took to speak it. Ms. Nwosu smiled, proud. Jamal knew the road ahead was long and steep, but today, his voice had broken the silence. After the assembly, Jamal found himself surrounded by whispers, some curious, some uncertain, and some hopeful. Students who had never spoken to him before came forward. "Your poem, it made me think," one girl said quietly. A teacher approached too. "You have a powerful voice, Jamal. Don't lose it." Jamal felt a flicker of something new, a spark of connection, of possibility. That evening he sat with his family. His mother's eyes glistened with pride and tears. His father placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "We're proud of you, son." His father said softly, "You're changing things, one word at a time." Outside, the city hummed with life. The same streets, but now, Jamal felt they held new promise. He knew the fight for justice would continue. But now, he wasn't alone. Days turned into weeks, and Jamal's courage inspired others. A small group of students came together, determined to make a difference. They called themselves Voices Rising. They organized meetings, wrote letters to the school board, and held peaceful demonstrations. Their message was clear: equality, respect, and justice for all. One afternoon, Jamal stood again before the school, but this time not alone. Hundreds gathered, their voices united in a single call for change. Though the path was still difficult, the movement grew stronger, and with every step, Jamal knew that even in the darkest times, hope could shine through. The school board finally agreed to listen. Jamal and his friends were invited to speak at a meeting. Their voices echoed through the halls where once silence reigned. They spoke of unfair rules, hidden biases, and the pain of being unseen. Their words touched hearts and opened minds. Change began. New policies, diversity programs, and honest conversations. The school was far from perfect, but it was no longer indifferent. Jamal realized the true power of unity and courage. His story was not just his own. It was a thread in a larger tapestry of voices demanding justice. And as he looked around, he saw faces, once fearful, now filled with hope. Years later, Jamal walked through the halls of his old school. Now, a place transformed. Walls that once echoed silence now thrummed with laughter and lively discussions about equality and respect. He saw new students, different faces, but the same hopeful eyes. Jamal smiled, knowing that change starts with a single voice and grows with the courage of many. His journey was just the beginning, a spark that would ignite generations to come. Though Jamal had graduated, his fight was far from over. He became a community leader, organizing workshops, mentoring youth, and speaking out against injustice wherever he found it. He traveled to other towns and cities, sharing his story and listening to others who had faced similar struggles. Each voice added strength to a growing movement. But Jamal knew the road ahead was long. Systemic change required patience, persistence, and unwavering hope. One evening, as he stood before a crowd in a distant city, Jamal looked out and saw hundreds of faces shining with determination. The spark he had lit was now a blazing fire. Together they were building a future where every child, no matter their skin color, could dream freely and live equally. Not everyone welcomed the change. In some places, Jamal and his allies faced resistance, from those afraid of losing power or unwilling to confront uncomfortable truths. Protests were met with hostility, doors were closed, voices were silenced. But Jamal remembered the lessons from his school days: persistence, unity, and the strength found in community. He organized peaceful rallies, educational campaigns, and dialogues between divided groups. Slowly, hearts and minds began to shift. One day, a young girl approached Jamal after a talk. She told him her story, how she felt invisible, unheard, and afraid. Jamal listened closely and smiled. "You are not alone," he said. "Your voice matters." And with that, a new generation found its courage to speak up, to stand tall, and to build a world where everyone belongs. Years passed, and Jamal watched as the seeds he had planted blossomed into a movement that reshaped communities. Schools taught the truth about history, police forces began real reforms, and neighborhoods that once stood divided now thrived in solidarity. Jamal stood at a rally, surrounded by young faces full of hope and determination. He raised his voice one last time. Change is not just possible, it is unstoppable. Together we will build a world where justice and equality are not dreams, but reality for all. The crowd erupted in cheers, a chorus of unity that echoed far beyond that day. And though Jamal's journey had come full circle, the story of their fight for dignity and rights would live on, carried forward by every voice brave enough to speak, every hand willing to help, and every heart committed to justice.